Hello everybody out there, my name is Chris and I'm coming to you with a little review of the giant Mouse Ace Tribeca, which I just have recently received and probably used for the last couple of weeks. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about it, about my use and how I think it compares to some of Giant Mouse's other knives, as well as give you some impression about its build quality and my experience so far. So let's go over some basic specifications of the knife in the first place. So this is a knife that comes in with a plate length of 2.875 inches or 73 millimeters, and it is a Magnacut plate in a stone washed finish. Overall plate thickness is sitting around 3 millimeters. I measured 3.25 millimeters or 0.13 inches, and the handle length comes in at 4 inches. Overall length then is at 7.3 inches and it comes in as at a weight of 4.1 ounces or 117 grams. The knife, to the best of my knowledge, is manufactured in Italy, as are most of the Giant Mouse Ace line knives, with the exception of some who are made in China by Riyadh. Now let's have a closer look at the knife itself and see what we've got here. So this version is the denim canvas micarta version of the knife. So if we just get it to focus, it is a really nice micarta. The hardware, as far as I can tell, is titanium, and it comes with a T8 at the pivot pin, and here at the back where you have the pocket clip mount, that appears to be a T8 as well. The pocket clip is just a basic wire clip, which personally I like a lot, mostly because it's not as in the way as, let's say, a milled pocket clip. I find it to be perfectly functional. It slips in and out of the pocket absolutely nicely. It is really quite functional. You can see you have a really nice ramp on it as well. So it gives you plenty of room here at the back when it actually rides in your pocket on that particular area there, and it is just brilliantly working flawlessly. So that's a big plus in my view, and it also doesn't distract too much from the overall appearance of the knife. Whereas a milled pocket clip, in my opinion, quite often is a little bit in the way. It is especially in a liner lock with a G10 or with a micarta scale. It comes a little bit in the way in terms of optics. Other than that, you have a liner lock, and the liners are actually inset, so they're sitting ever so slightly inside the micarta scales, which is really nice. So it's really unobtrusive, and it looks as if it is made out of just a solid block, which is a nice feature. The back spacer there, that is brass. Now personally I'm not too keen about that one. I kind of understand the design decision, but the reality is everything on that thing is really silver, and so just a two-tone blue and silver would have served it better, in my personal opinion. I kind of understand that, you know, if you go denim blue, then a lot of rivets on your blue jeans perhaps would have a copper or maybe a brass look to it, but that isn't really, you know, there was no reason in my view to actually put another color in there, and I think it would have looked just plain cleaner if they would have stuck just with a titanium backspacer there. Other than that, I think the position of the lanyard hole there, or the backspacer cut out for the lanyard hole, is done really nicely. So it's exactly where you want it, and it looks rather nice. Now, as far as size comparisons are concerned, I have a Grand Ace, also from Giant Mouse, sitting next to it now, and this one here is a Jutland. just to give you a little bit of an idea how it compares size-wise. You might already have one of those knives, and you can see it's a rather small knife by comparison. As far as I'm concerned, 3.5 inches blade length is about the longest that I would want to carry in a everyday carry situation. The Jutland is already a little bit on the biggish side. The Grand Ace is at 3.3 inches, I believe, about the perfect size. But if you're after something more compact and something that doesn't look as much as a murder weapon as, let's say, something with a bit more of an aggressive look, then perhaps a smaller knife with a smaller blade, such as the Tribeca, might just be absolutely perfect for you. As far as the blade is concerned, you have a full flat grind, or almost full flat grind on this blade that comes down to a really nice edge, and you have a nice and pronounced finger choil sitting right there where you reach in, and you actually have a really nice and comfortable grip on this knife. In giant mouse fashion, you can see that we have a relatively far forward jimping, and I absolutely love this. This is absolutely great if you are to do any kind of detailing work. That is actually exactly where you would want your jimping to be in order to prevent your index from slipping. And likewise, if you take heavier cuts, you get your thumb pretty nicely just behind the material you want to cut, and that is exactly where your thumb is supposed to be, and it gives you a really nice and well executed jimping that does work just as you would imagine it to work. In terms of well, deployment, you have two deployment options on this knife. For one, there's a flipper tab, and that absolutely works perfectly. The detent is nicely tuned for that flipper tab. It's relatively hard to fail, so it's certainly more of a, should I say, light switch type. You can also push down on it and just apply pressure by really squeezing your index finger down, but it gets a little bit harder. It works fine, but there is a tiny bit of a high spot here then, and you certainly feel that, and it's not quite as comfortable. Also, the jimping just right there on your flipper tab is at the absolute perfect spot, and as you can see, the entire blade and all of its corners are really nicely contoured, and there's not any sharp edges other than on the blade itself. So that is quite nicely done, and it is the same across every giant mouse knife I have had so far, so that's really well executed. As far as shutting it, I'm certain it will break in, but at this point in time it is not the most brilliant shutting action. As far as I'm concerned, I don't mind that too much. For me, knives are everyday tools, and I'm not sitting around all day opening and closing the knives, so I know there's a fidget factor to it, and some enjoyment of a really smooth action, but if the knife goes doesn't fall shut all by itself, I don't mind too much. So for me, it is very much okay to just close it to, come over the detent, close it to that point, and then just close it down with your thumb. That's absolutely fine, and not necessarily a reason to say, well, this knife isn't very good. It is in fact a rather well executed knife. There are a number of little niggles that I have with it. One of them is perhaps that I would expect for a knife that is retailing at around $200 US. If you have a closer look, and you can see that the knife isn't quite coming with a perfectly even grind. You can see how down there at the finger choil it looks rather thin, and then it transitions into a rather wide grind towards the tip. And it's the same on the other side. So this is as it came from the factory. It comes sharp. There's no issues about the sharpness ex-factory, but unfortunately there's a couple of wonky spots in the grind. So it is not the finest grind that I've ever seen from a factory. It is a little bit on the rougher side. It came paper slicing sharp, so there's no issues about that, but I think a valid criticism at that point would be to say, well, you're paying $200 US for this particular knife, and knives in that price bracket, you would usually expect it to come with a reasonably executed grind. One of the other issues that I've seen on some other giant mouse knives is that it really comes with a little bit of a sticky point when it comes to the liner lock. And if I can show you this in here, you can see how in there the engagement area that actually engages with your liner is not a finely ground surface. So usually you would expect from a company to see that this is really a nice and smooth surface, but unfortunately there's a little bit, due to that roughness, I see a little bit of lock stick there, so it's not quite perfect. Overall, the Micarta compared to some other Micarta choices, also if you already have giant mouse knives, the canvas linen micarta, or the canvas micarta in this particular case, is much finer in its grain, which is absolutely fine, but just make sure you're not expecting the same kind of micarta in terms of texture that you would see on the Grand Ace, or as you would see on the Jutland. It is more like really of, to the Kaiser. The Kaiser also has a linen kind of texture to it, and it is absolutely nice. I really love that kind of texture, but just to be aware, it is slightly different from the micarta that you would usually see from giant mouse. So apart from that, I don't have a lot of niggles. I've been using the knife for maybe 2 to 3 weeks now, and it's been my daily pocket knife for that period of time. It's a little bit early to say whether the Magnacut is really all that the hype is trying to make you believe. So far I feel it kind of performs on a similar level like let's say an M390 or a 20CV or SV35. So it's really hard to tell, and in all reality the way I'm using the knife, and most people actually use their knives as an EDC knife, they're probably cutting a little bit of rope, a little bit of cardboard, opening packages, and rougher tasks are, not happening on a daily basis really. And so any of these high performing knives you would expect to actually stand up for a good number of weeks before you have to resharpen them. So as far as the knife is concerned and its hardness, I haven't done a sharpening on it yet, but as far as I can tell at this point in time, there's no unusual early dullness to it. So on that end, and as far as hardening is concerned, all the giant mouse knives that I had so far in LMAX and M390 have performed really nicely. Now I heard a number of people saying well, the Italy-made giant mouse knives, they're not perfect. And each one of the knives that I have to attest they're not perfect. So this one in particular, the Jutland, came with an extremely late lockup. So there's hardly anything left on that particular knife, and it really kind of locks really late, right? And so there's a lot of pressure on that lock bar too, and so this knife also is a finger closing knife. Whereas you see on that Ace, Crowned Ace, you don't have that. It is actually spot on in terms of a lockup, and in this particular case it has broken in superbly, so this is closing perfectly fine. It's a heavier blade as well, but I'm sure that over time the little Tribeca will break in just as nicely, and I could perhaps open the pivot a little bit, but really I'd prefer to see how it ages and how the action will improve over time. So would I spend $200 and keep it? Obviously I did. If you are a little bit more pedantic about what you expect from your knife, I'd say, well, for this kind of price tag you could get better. So just for a comparison's sake, if you pay $79 for that little Kaiser T1 by comparison, then you get a pristine action, absolutely fall shut with nothing at any point, albeit, you know, that's just 154 cm, but a beautiful action with a beautiful knife in a similar kind of size. I say, well, you know, between the two, if you're really a knife nerd, then Magnacut is obviously exactly what you want. But would I say I want to pay over $100 more for the giant Mouse Micarta compared, let's say, to a knife which is quite similar in size and functionality as compared to the Kaiser T1? That gets a little bit hard to justify, really. And so from a design perspective, I love each and every one of them, and I keep carrying them, so they're landing in my pocket quite frequently, and for good reason, because they are just ergonomically, they're just designed really well. If you can overlook that one, and you can live with the price point, it is certainly a recommendation. So you cannot, doing these comparisons and actually trying to assess the quality of a knife, you cannot leave your subjective preferences out of the equation. So you gotta look at that and say, well, it is rather lovely, albeit with a few little niggles. Alright, that's me. I hope you enjoyed this. There's going to be more coming from me in the future, and stay tuned. Alright, see ya.